Tonight's speaker is Kimberly Fraser. Kimberly is the outreach specialist for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service at the National Black-footed Ferret Conservation Center here in Colorado. She's been with the BFF recovery program since 2009. Her focus is supporting the many partners from state, federal, tribal, non-governmental organizations, and private landowners that participate in the recovery program, as well as public outreach through social media. Kimberly is also the Black-footed Ferret Program Coordinator at the Museum of Discovery in Fort Collins, Colorado. The museum houses one of the best live Black-footed ferret displays in the US. Kimberly is passionate about the BFF recovery program and the conservation efforts to save one of the most endangered mammals in North America. So please join me in welcoming Kimberly Fraser.
Thank you, John. That was lovely. I first want to say two of my favorite people, you're all my favorite people, but Dave Leatherman and Sue Kenny, I have known for ages, and I am so honored that they are here, and I just love them to death. Anyway, so thank you. Thank you for having me tonight. You know, the real star is BFF Dude. He's a very famous ferret in the conservation world, and I'll tell you about that in a little bit later. I brought with me two CSU students that help at the museum take care of Dude and the other ferret, Patty Ann, Micaiah, and Mina. And so they're here, they're going to answer questions. And I brought two of the husbandry people that still have all 10 fingers. And so they'll be able to tell you what it's like to take care of black-footed ferrets. So tonight I'm going to talk about who the black-footed ferret is. You know, again, one of the most endangered mammals in North America. Why we save them? Why is that important? I'm going to talk about the Endangered Species Act. It's the 50th year anniversary. Thought I never would say this, but thank you, Richard Nixon, for signing that. And so I'm going to talk about that and why that's important. And then we are going to come up and meet Dude. We brought an education board with some handouts and just enjoy the evening. It's a real treat to see a live black-footed ferret. Most Americans will never get to see one. So here we go. Okay, now I'm going to talk about Audubon. You know, we didn't even know black-footed ferrets existed until Audubon first described them in 1851. He was traveling in Wyoming on the Platte River, recording what he did best. You know, he was a cute, observant, you know, person of nature, a biologist. You know, he knew about ferrets, the European ferret, but he didn't know about the black-footed ferret. Someone gave him a pelt, and from that pelt, he drew this rendering of the ferret. Now, you know, we often don't think he made mistakes, right? But he made a tremendous boo-boo when he drew the ferret. Can anybody tell me what it is? Terry, I know you know.
It's the wrong flavor of prey.
Exactly. Audubon was familiar with the European ferret, which really had a more varied diet. And if you so choose tonight, you can go to Petco and buy one of those European ferrets. But he drew the ferret hunting a nest of eggs. He didn't know that the black-footed ferret's diet, 90% of it is prairie dog, because he just had the pelt. 1851, native people of the Great Plains knew about the ferret. In fact, the Lakota called them Pispiza itopasapa, meaning black-faced prairie dog. They were mystical, you know, they were nocturnal. They only saw them at night if they saw them at all. And they just thought maybe they were another prairie dog that had, you know, emerald shine eyes and a black mask. So black-footed ferrets are in the Mustelidae family. Badgers, wolverines, minks, otters. They all have a lot of hair, big sharp teeth, and a bad boy on the block attitude. So if you can imagine holding a badger, holding a black-footed ferret is worse. They're so charismatic and cute, but they will take your face off. They are vicious. I've been bitten, believe me, in 14 years, I've been bitten many times. Someone today said to me, you know, they're kind of like this cute little cuddly thing, but the inside's a wolverine trying to get out. In fact, I like to say if they were the size of German shepherds, none of us would leave our homes. They're that vicious. Okay, so there we have our black-footed ferret. Okay, so who are these ferrets? Well, in the whole world, there are only 3 species of ferret. There's the black-footed ferret, there's the domestic ferret that you can get at Petco, and then there's the Siberian polecat, and they live in Mongolia. They're much heavier, weightier, more varied diet, and they really have, I like to say they're a badass. I mean, they really have quite a temper. And we had to deal with them in the early years of black-footed ferret recovery. We didn't have enough black-footed ferrets to test vaccines and other medications. And so we brought over some of those polecats from Mongolia and bred them with the black-footed ferrets. It was, I mean, those guys did miss fingers. I mean, they were pretty tough. But out of 3 species in the whole world, we have one right here as a native species. That's pretty special. So what are the characteristics? Black mask, black feet, and a black tip tail. That coat color buff blends into the prairie soil, short legs, and a large torso. Now, where would an animal like this live? They are suited, very well suited, to live in the under reaches of the short grass prairie in burrow systems. They move into what the prairie dogs have dug. Black-footed ferrets do not even excavate. It's the prairie dog that does all the work. So the ferret moves in, sets up a home, seeks shelter from all the predators and weather, and then their grocery store is like right there in the basement. You know, it's evolution in its finest hour, really. They have evolved, even though 90% of their diet is prairie dog, they've evolved with that dog, and it's pretty good deal. You know, probably ground nesting birds, you know, small snakes, other rodents like 13-line ground squirrels or mice. So this is my favorite word on the planet, fossorial. You know, I always say that to children and they say, what does that mean? Well, where do you find fossils? Underground. So they're a fossorial predator and an obligate carnivore. They cannot live without prairie dogs. They're obligated. And pretty vicious, look at that. They're nocturnal. You know, that eye shine, you know, every animal of the night has that nocturnal, that Sue Kenny taught us, tapetum lucidum in the back of the eyelids. Black-footed ferrets have that beautiful emerald green. Every time I go out into the wilds to release them or spotlight to look for them, when you see that, I get teared up. It's just beautiful. It's like 2 shining emeralds looking back at you. Okay, their historic range. You know, it coincided with 3 of the 5 different species of prairie dog in the United States, the blacktail, the whitetail, and the Gunnison. Way up in Canada, we've put them at Grasslands National Park, and we've also put them down in Janos, Mexico, and 12 Western states. And so wherever you find prairie dog colonies large enough, you could have black-footed ferrets. And we really feel the ground zero, 300, 400, 2,000 years ago for black-footed ferrets was probably Kansas. So the decline of the black-footed ferret. Why are they endangered? Well, 3 things happened. You know, when they were rediscovered in 1851, we really didn't look for them until about 1940, 1950. And when we started looking, we just didn't find them. And that's the first time we thought they were extinct. We had plowed up the Great Plains, a disease called plague was moving across the landscape, and then we were poisoning their food, prairie dogs. So, you know, it's a good thing, right? We feed our people, agriculture, feed our people, we feed a good portion of the world. But between 1880 and 1920, we plowed up all but about 98% of the Great Plains. And that's okay. Like I said, we feed our people, not so good for the native species. Eradication of the prairie dog. Great poisoning campaigns happened. You know, that pile of dog is one day's poisoning in Arizona. The bottom, if you can read it, it says U.S. Biological Survey. That's us. That's U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. That's what we used to be called. Those words are spelled out in prairie dog bodies. So the hatred, you know, I grew up in Florida on a ranch. You know, our cows sometimes calved out on the Cypress area, swamp islands. We had gators that sometimes took our calves, but we didn't want to kill every gator on the planet because of it. Prairie dog hatred in the West is something I have a really hard time with. I just don't understand it. We know that because of the ecosystems that they build, over 100 other species depend directly or indirectly on those colonies. Really important. You know, we call them a keystone species. They're really maybe a foundation species, because if they move away or die, so many other species do the same. Disease. So this is our biggest challenge in prairie, black-footed ferret recovery, plague. It came to this country about 1906 through San Francisco, because ships from China came to San Francisco, and on those ships were rats, and on those rats were fleas. And fleas are the vector that carries plague. It's the same plague that killed off Europe, except we call it sylvatic plague when it's in the wildlife populations. I love this slide, and it's the only one I'm going to show you like this, but the yellow and the red is possible land area that we can put black-footed ferrets. I like to show this because, you know, people often say, you just want to cover up the West with prairie dogs. They're hated, but you want to do that because of black-footed ferrets. Not true. We need 1/10 of 1% of what's available to recover the species. It's a big country. So we don't want to cover up the West with prairie dogs. We just want enough satellite nurseries, you know, other locations that we can have black-footed ferrets. So this is the best story in American conservation, hands down. Thought they were extinct twice, rediscovered in Metis, Wyoming, turned the conservation world upside down in 1981. John Hogg here is the Metis landowner that owned the dog Shep. And they woke up in the middle of the night to Shep fighting with something in the yard, and it was a black-footed ferret. And if that event hadn't happened, I wouldn't be here tonight. Dude wouldn't be here tonight, because that was the last wild population that we had in North America. We just didn't know it. Very fortuitous. The lower half, I love this. Sue and Dave are gonna love that because they're, you know, biologists. Those are the first biologists that worked on black-footed ferrets in Metis, Wyoming. They're all still around. They don't look that young, but man, do they have stories of what it was like to realize that you had rediscovered a species thought extinct, but we were given another chance to do the right thing and save them from the brink of extinction. So extinction? Nah, no way. I work up at the National Black-footed Ferret Conservation Center, which is north of Fort Collins. You get off the Buckeye exit, you get on the frontage road, you go about 1.25 miles, you turn to the east, and there we are. We look like a government compound, and we are. We house 2/3 of the world's population of captive black-footed ferrets. We have other partners that help us in the breeding. Right now, today, we paired 4 females and males. It's very exciting up there. A little dangerous, but very exciting. And so they're born in the main building, breeding building. They're the size of your pinky when they're born. They can't move, they can't see. If they do move, they have to pull themselves by their front legs. They can't use their back legs. They don't even open their eyes until day 35. So they're very slow growing. And then by 90 days, they're almost the size of an adult. So why would they be born that small, neonates, you know, they can't see? And that's because if I'm going to move, That's because if the females became bulbous in pregnancy, they couldn't maneuver those burrow systems. And so their babies are half baked or neonates. Neonates. They're great mothers. This is Montgomery. She, typically they have 3 to 5 kits. She had 10. And so when she died, I said, I'm going to mount her. We've only had 2 ferrets in the whole program since 1987 when it was started that had 10 kits. She raised them all. We had to foster one of the older kits to another female. In fact, that's really amazing about female black-footed ferrets. Whether it's a newborn or a 10-day-old or a 30-day-old, or if they're out in the preconditioning pens, female ferrets will take on anybody. They will nurse them. They will teach them to hunt. They really think, it takes a village and we're going to do this. So they're so cute. They are just adorable. And, we hold them until they open their eyes and then they look at you. And that's when they give you a good bite because you are not a black-footed ferret. The AZA, American Zoo Aquarium Association, we have other zoos that help us. So we have the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo, the Louisville Zoo, the Phoenix Zoo, the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute in Front Royal, and then the Toronto Zoo in Canada. So the other third of black-footed ferrets, captive breeding, are located at those zoos. And we do this great kind of runaround in the fall because we can't breed just our ferrets to each other. We may need a female from Louisville or 2 males from Phoenix. And so we do these great transfers across the country. We do in vans. And you haven't lived until you have 30 some ferrets in a van. And, they all poop at the same time. And you get out of the van and you go, how come no one wants to be near? Well, you smell like it. So, we enjoy it though. It's a lot of fun and it's great partnerships. Preconditioning pens. And this is really what we're known for. When the kits are 60 days old, they go out into these pens. They're 40 by 40. They have raptor nets on the top because there's a number of raptors that hunt black-footed ferrets. The great horned owl is a big predator on them because they are also nocturnal. Ferruginous hawks. Last year, I got some great shots of ferruginous hawks that came down. Have you seen them lie down next to burrows? They lie down next to the burrow and they wait. And if a prairie dog pops up, or I didn't get a black-footed ferret, they'll snatch them. I don't know too many birds that lie down to hunt. Really, really cool. So they stay a minimum of 30 days out in the preconditioning pens with their mom, learning how to kill live prairie dogs. In the early days, we cold release them from cages, thinking they're apex predators. They can do it. Zippo survival almost. So they have to learn, as they do in the wild, to kill prairie dogs by their mom. Okay, so where do we put them then? Yikes, we got them. Where are they going to go? Right now we have, I'm going to bring this up because we just added one last year. We have 33 reintroduction sites from Grasslands National Park, again, down to Janos, Mexico. Southern Plains Lands Trust down in outside of Lamar is our 33rd site that we did last year. We're going to do a new site this year in Colorado down at the Pueblo Depot. And so it's pretty exciting to have all these different partners in other states with black-footed ferrets in the wild. And Harry, where are they in Colorado that is close to here?
Oh, that would be Soapstone Prairie Natural Area.
Exactly. Sue Kenny was a part of that, putting black-footed ferrets at Soapstone. I will say this about the city of Fort Collins Natural Areas Program. They have put us on the map when it comes to recovery efforts. No partner has done more for us than the city of Fort Collins. At one time, we couldn't even put ferrets in the wild because the legislation did not allow us. But Natural Areas stepped up. They went to Denver for us. they went and they got the laws passed. And so we are very grateful. Plus, they're just phenomenal at managing those ferrets up at Soapstone. I signed on for 2 programs in October. If you come up there, you'll hear all about black-footed ferrets, and then you go out and look for them. And Harry, didn't you see one?
We did see a black-footed ferret in the wild. It took 6 trips, but no, it's an awesome thing going up there. We also saw deer, we saw coyotes, we saw badgers, and by God, on that 6th trip, we saw a black-footed ferret,
Yeah.
and their eye shine truly is unmistakable.
Oh, Harry, do you want to come work at the Ferret Center? Yes, it is. So if you can come. It's a great opportunity. There's nothing else like seeing a live black-footed ferret in the wild, because you just won't see them. They spend about 90% of their time underground. One female, Little Montgomery, her territory in the wild would be about 180 acres just for her that she would defend. So how do you find them? Nocturnal, solitary, large tracts of land. So if you ever have an opportunity, do it. And it's all really about the people. Someone once said to me, oh, black-footed ferrets. No, it's about the people saving the black-footed ferret. That's really what it's about. We have great partners that help us. That's up in Meeteetse. This is in Kanata Basin. Even a cowboy is out there releasing a ferret. And again, plague. It's our biggest challenge. If there's anything that does the ferret in, it'll be plague. I'm going to tell you a very cool story that's happening with one of our partnerships in cloning the black-footed ferret. And we hope to clone black-footed ferrets so they're resistant to plague, which I know sounds like a fairy tale, but there's a lot today that sounds like a fairy tale. So we really kind of hope that effort happens. Some other efforts, they're dusting. We have to dust burrows with insecticide to kill those fleas. I worry that 100 years from now, they're going to say, oh, what were they thinking, putting all that insecticide underground, because it kills every invertebrate down there to save this little mustelid. The plane is something, the prairie dog is munching on a sabbatic plague vaccine pellet that have been developed. And so Christy Bly here from World Wildlife Fund, they send up drones and little planes that can run transects on the prairie dog colonies. They come back, they load them up with the plague vaccine, they take it out and they drop it. Pretty interesting stuff going on. Live BFF display facilities. So there are 25 across the country. None on the West Coast. We're working on the Seattle Zoo and the San Diego Zoo right now. But these are great opportunities, again, for Americans to see a live black-footed ferret. You get to see Dude tonight, but where do you go to see one? I mean, I know you're going to say Soapstone, but where, if you had a real interest, well, let me put it this way. If you wanted to see a grizzly bear or a wolf, where would you go? And don't say Colorado. Yellowstone. You can do that, right? You can see megafauna. You can see endangered species. But where do you go to see this charismatic animal? Where? So our display facilities are important. There's a whole variety. This one, I'm leaving. This one in Kansas, I love this one because this is Milford Nature Center. They have a local prison. She assigns the prisoners to make their black-footed ferret displays. That's great. But anyway, ferrets don't need a lot of space. Dude would probably not do well in that display, but most of these displays are just on wheels. You don't have to knock out whole walls at zoos to have a black-footed ferret display. So it's really important. FC Mod. Anybody been to the museum? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you get to see Dude. You get to see Patty Ann, and Patty Ann right now is the oldest living ferret in captivity. She is 9 years old. In the wild, they live 1 to 3 years. In captivity, they can live to be 6 or 7. And she looks pretty good, doesn't she, girls? Yeah, she looks pretty good. In fact, she bit the vet a month ago. Because I didn't say this, but I can actually pick him up. But Patty, and so I said, oh, Patty Ann, she's 9, Della, don't worry about it. And she bit her and she was bleeding everywhere. But go by the museum, you know, we do ferret feedings the 1st and 3rd Saturday of every month. You get to see them tear open a bag, or in Dude's case, he takes his bag down below. Again, it's just a great opportunity to see one. Recovery partners. We have over 50 partners that help us in recovery. State, federal, tribal. In fact, more ferrets have been put on more tribal lands than any other type of land. NGOs like National Wildlife Federation, World Wildlife Fund, defenders, yes, guardians sometimes, but definitely defenders. And then private landowners, because we could not do this program alone. How would we, on our small little 12-person crew up there, monitor all those ferret sites, get them out into the wild? We just couldn't do it. So we depend on all our partners to help us. Hey, Elizabeth Ann, anybody, did you hear about the clone that we had back in, you know, she was born December 10th, 2021. It's been a great endeavor. When those ferrets were rediscovered in Matisse back in 1981, when they finally captured up the last remaining of them, because they started to die from plague. And so they made a decision with Wyoming Game and Fish. They caught up the remaining ferrets. There were 20. Immediately 2 died. One named Willa, a female, and one that didn't have a name. They just called him SB2, stud book number 2. And he died from distemper. So it was a fortuitous event that the vet at that time, Tom Thorne, met Ollie Ryder, who was at the San Diego Zoo, the frozen zoo, at a meeting. And they decided to send, Tom decided to send Ollie skin grafts from those 2 ferrets that had died. So they were down to 18. Out of those 18 ferrets, they bred them all. They didn't know what they were doing, but they bred them all. And we now know, because we've mapped the genome of all 3 species of ferret, only 7 contributed their genes. So every black-footed ferret right now comes from 7 individuals. Bottleneck. So think about if 7 of us were in this room were responsible for the human race, we wouldn't be looking so good after a couple of generations. But carnivores, ferrets do, I don't want to say well, they do okay with genetic bottlenecking. Won't be forever. So about 5 years ago, we had a group of geneticists from Revive and Restore. They were working on the woolly mammoth. They came to us, and also you would find this interesting, passenger pigeons. They cannot clone birds right now because of the egg. They have to figure that out. But mammals, they can. So they came to us and they partnered with Biogen, which is the company that if you love your dog and you love your cat, for $25,000 for your cat and $20,000 for your dog, you can have them cloned by Biogen. And people are hopping mad when they get their dog, because they'll say, that's not Fido. Well, it looks like Fido, but it doesn't act like Fido. So that's what you have to understand. Clones are clones. They look like the animal, but that's not behavior, the same behavior. So they came to us and they said, we would like to clone the black-footed ferret for 2 reasons, because they're genetically bottlenecked. We have these 2 samples stored at San Diego since 1987. We can use that DNA and clone those 2 ferrets. By putting them, and if we're successful, then if we breed them into this population, it's going to give them a bump of about 30% more genetic material. So why wouldn't we do it? So we issued them a permit to clone black-footed ferrets, but only in the laboratory, because, you know, we're honest. We're servants of you. And when we do anything in the federal government, we put it where? In the Federal Register, right? For comment. No one cared. No one made a comment. So we said, okay, fine, we're going to do it. So we did it. They destroyed the embryos at 20 weeks. which was in the permit. The next time around, they came back to us, and my boss, who actually is going to be retiring, Dave, you could have a new career. You could apply for his job. Pete Gober's retiring this summer. And they came to Pete and they said, we would like to take those clones to full term. And Pete said, oh, I don't know if we can do that. You know, we'll have to do another permit and do this and that. So he had all of us go home and we read the big mega biological opinion that sets over us in this region. We found one little sentence that gave us enough wiggle room, not to say you shouldn't trust your federal government, enough wiggle room to do it. And we did it. And we brought those embryos, those clones to full term. Unfortunately, most of them died. In fact, all of them died, but Elizabeth Ann. And her story alone is something, you know, she had a sister. They were implanted in a domestic female ferret, and her sister came out and was dead. So they bagged her up. Elizabeth Ann came out and she wasn't looking so good. So they tried to revive her. They couldn't. So they put her in a bag, set her on a table. And one of our staff walked in the room, was not in the room. She walked in the room, looked as she passed and said, that kit gasped. So they pulled Elizabeth out and resuscitated her. So it's a great story. And she's up at the Ferret Center. I go see her almost every day. She looks like a black-footed ferret. But every time I see her, I always say, you're a 1987 ferret, because it really just blows my mind. But she's the only one. We tried to breed her. We could not. She had some complications. But she is still the first clone of a North American endangered species. When she was born, 1.36 billion people on the planet heard about her. That's 1 out of every 7 people. Pretty famous ferret. Tomorrow night, I'll be down at the Fort Collins Airport picking up more domestic ferret mamas implanted with clones. And so we're doing it again this spring. And we're pretty excited. We'll have more Willas. We'll have more Elizabeth Ann. SB2 that died from distemper, they could not use his DNA because it was embedded with distemper. Well, guess what they were able to do last year? They removed the distemper and they didn't use CRISPR. So many techniques are being developed in this science area that the ferret is leading. We hope it helps elephants and white rhinos and, you know, other species that are in peril, in danger. So I keep saying, are we going to do like Elizabeth Ann 2, Elizabeth Ann 3, or, you know, but it's a pretty exciting time. One more thing about her. So because she was a clone in the first clone, we handled her every day, which we normally don't do. And we started to watch if she was meeting the metrics, you know, the markers for development. She wasn't. We could hold her. We didn't try to kiss her, but we would hold her. And then one day, Robin went into the nest box and she literally jumped up and tried to get her. And we went, okay, black-footed ferret. So it just took a little bit of time, but she is a real black-footed ferret. Okay, 50th anniversary. Why is this important? Yeah, it just is, you know, it's the longest running act in the world, historically. Other countries use part of it. They use all of it. It works. It works. And I know there's always controversy about having endangered species on your land. Your rights may be not taken away, but altered because of the protections for that species. But, you know, and I'm speaking to the choir here, we would have lost the bald eagle if it had not been listed. And then we would have had to go with what Ben Franklin wanted us to have, which was the American turkey. And you know what? We are not turkey people. We are not turkey people. I love turkeys, but we are bald eagle people. Yeah. So it works. It really works. And this is the 50th anniversary. I've been on the National Planning Committee, and my boss said, okay, they're tired of the ferret because the banner, that's the national banner that they just came out with. And I sent them so many photos of ferrets that they use the ferret now as the representative for mammals. And then this painting, is it not beautiful? Every region chose a species to go on their poster, and we're region 6, so we're Rocky Mountains. They were saying, oh, we need to have the grizzly bear, we need to have the wolf. I sent them so many ferret photos that they said how charismatic. And so they had an artist in California. It's even more beautiful than this. It really takes away the depth of the color. But he painted these different portraits. And when the condor people saw this, they were like, oh, why does the ferret look so good? Why does the condor look? And I was like, well, I love condors. I think they're beautiful, but come on, So those posters are coming out. I'm going to have a whole slew of them at the Fort Collins Museum of Discovery around Endangered Species Day next month. Come and get one because you can probably sell it on eBay in 10 years for $1,000 million, who knows? But they're going to be really nice posters. There are murals being painted all over the country. I'm going up in May to the Badlands outside of Wall. Joel Sartori, the one that does photo arc. He did a whole group of collectible stamps. And so the Postal Service is releasing those stamps, and dude is going to be there. And so it's going to be a pretty cool event. And it's just something to celebrate as Americans. We had some Chinese repro scientists, panda repro scientists, come about 9 years ago. And, they just wanted to know about the captive breeding program. And so they had an interpreter, and we were never quite so sure that she was really asking them what we were saying, but we wanted to know why us? And they said, you breed pandas. And the response was, well, you Americans do pretty much everything right. And we just wanted to see a really good captive breeding program. So they came up to the Ferret Center. We took them down to Ted Turner's ranch in New Mexico, and they got to release a ferret. Every single one cried when he released that ferret. It was very moving. They wouldn't have their picture taken with an American flag, but they did release a ferret. So, the ferret is kind of, I think, the poster child for conservation on many, many levels. So why care? Why care about this little mustelid? It's insignificant on the landscape. It doesn't control prairie dog numbers. We can't see it. It's kind of like this mystical unicorn on the landscape. We know it's there. It's kind of like pumas, right? We know it's there. We just can't see it. So why care about it? We care about it because number one, it's the right thing to do. And number two, it's a native species. We should care for all our native species. I like to say to kids, who knows about elephants? Who knows about tigers? Kids even know about scarlet macaws, but they don't know about our native species. And that's something that lives in our backyard, belongs to us as Americans, and we should want to take care of it. So this ecosystem, swift fox, badger, ferruginous hawk, burrowing owl, coyote, largest predator right now in the Great Plains, right? What did it used to be? That great white plains wolf that is now gone. Prairie rattlesnake, lagomorphs, and the black-footed ferret. And what a beautiful puzzle. What's something to be proud of? Look at that. It's beautiful. And so by saving the ferret, we are mandated by Congress to do that. And by doing that, we have to save who? The prairie dog. And by saving the prairie dog, all these associated species are brought along with it. They're kind of like on the ferret bus. It's kind of like the back door to conservation. The North American conservation model says you will save a species. You will save a wolf. You will save a grizzly bear. Back then, we knew it. We didn't really think about it. Habitat and how important that is. So we're saving this habitat by saving this little insignificant mustelid. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. Okay, I just threw this in there. Up at the Ferret Center, you know, they have a lot of weird stuff happen up there. And this happened back in 2016. There was a fire. We had a female badger come across the interstate with 2 kits. The kits set up camp along our road that comes into the Ferret Center. And one day, a female coyote and this badger took a friendship. I don't know what you want to call it. We saw them sunning together. We saw them hunting together. From a distance, we're not sure. We would see them maybe sharing a meal, not sure. I definitely have a picture of them smooching, which I don't show people because, but what a special relationship. And, you know, it was first described about 1940. And again, Native people knew about it. We did not. And now there's a graduate student at Lincoln working on this relationship. And she has cameras set all by the Ferret Center, way to the east of us and CSU's property. This happens all the time. She found that out 2 years ago. She has now gone into Wyoming, into Utah, setting up cameras. This happens all the time. We just don't see it. And so it's just really great. And so what I witnessed was badger would go underground, the prairie dogs would come up, and the coyote would snatch it. And we still see them on our night cameras. You know, we have wildlife cameras surrounding the perimeter of the Ferret Center. Have not seen them during the day, though. That's it. Any questions?
Take questions in the room. Every now and then, look at Andrew with the baseball cap to see if anybody online has a question.
Andrew in the baseball cap. Any questions online?
I did have one pop up from Paula. Rocky Mountain Arsenal is a great place to see ferrets. 2 are there in a display which shows them underground. Are ferrets released on the Arsenal grounds?
Yes, they are. And I want to say this, we cannot, I mean, our heartbeat is here in Fort Collins, but Rocky Mountain Arsenal, which is us, you know, it's Fish and Wildlife Service. When we put ferrets there in 2014, they managed for plague prior and managed every year intensively. I told you her acreage is 180, but because there was such a plentiful supply of food resource, those ferrets were setting on top of one another and they weren't killing each other. We can't explain it other than, you know, there was enough food, but they weren't fighting. They were moving over on the airport side, you know, they were getting killed on Pena Boulevard. I've actually found 3 dead ferrets on Pena. I hold the record. We just can't explain it. Why they just tolerated each other, even during whelping season. The females tolerated it. We're not sure why. We caught up some of those born kits of the year for 2 years and transferred them to other locations. And, you know, that's our goal. I hope, well, Pete's retiring, but I hope my next boss says you're fired, because that means we've done our job. You know, I would love to be fired. But I don't, you know if that's gonna really probably not happen in my lifetime. Those ferrets at the Arsenal have done great. Plague moved in about 2 years ago, decimated the colony. Their numbers have gone way down, but they're hanging in there. And ferrets, if they can travel to other colonies, they seem to do okay. That's why to clone a ferret that's resistant to plague would be so important. They still have to eat prairie dog, but maybe they could live long enough to get to another colony. And I hate to say this, I probably shouldn't say it, but I'm gonna, you know, we should probably also make prairie dogs resistant to plague. Nobody wants to hear that, but yeah.
Would eventually clone prairie dogs be able to reproduce?
You mean clone ferrets?
I mean, clone ferrets. Yeah, sorry.
Yes, lovely lady would like to know, would clone ferrets be able to reproduce? We don't know. You know, I said to them, when the geneticists first came to us and they were saying, oh, we can do this, we can do that. I was like, okay, as long as they don't become the size of German shepherds, because we'll never leave our homes, that's good. And they couldn't tell us what else might happen, because they're just tinkering around with DNA. And they're doing the best they can, but, so we don't know. Elizabeth Ann, I'll tell you her story real quick. Because I take all the photos for the program, Robin said, we're gonna breed her tomorrow. I got down there with my cameras and I started filming, and Robin, we take the males to the females. And we put the first male in there and she tore him up. And so we went, okay, she didn't like him. So we went, got another one, because, you know, we just can't breed ferrets to ferret. We have to, because of the genetic bottlenecking, we have to be very selective, and we have a number system of who we breed to who because of genetic drift. And so we went and got male number 2, put him in there. She bit him on the lip, okay, took him out, 4 males, and she just didn't accept any. And, you know, the females, we do vaginal washes on them to make sure they're shedding the right cells, saying that they're receptive. We do checks on the male. And so we just didn't understand it because she was like at 98%, which is usually a go. No go, no go, go, you know, just didn't work. And so we called the Smithsonian. They overnight flew out their AI team to artificially inseminate her the next day. So I got my cameras out again, and they went in with the lap, the scope, and when you hear a surgeon sucking their breath, hopefully you're not on the table, but you know, it was dead silence because she only had 1 kidney. She had 1 fallopian tube, you know, they have 2 tubes, and they couldn't see her uterus. It was stuck way in the back. And so they pulled it out. They decided to open her up. Yes, that's what was going on. Had no idea. They don't think it's due to the cloning. We do see this in black-footed ferrets because of the genetic bottlenecking. But, and then we went into Old Town and had quite a few beers. And so they tried to get, and those organs were full of fluid. And so they drained them, they treated them. It just didn't seem to work. So she had to have a hysterectomy about 1.5 years ago. But she's still the first clone of any endangered species. And tomorrow night, we're going to get more. So we hope, you know, that, yeah, thank you. Thank you. We work real hard. We spend many nights up. You know, we're only about a group of 12 of us up there, but it's, you know, when the war comes, I'm in those people's bunker because they are just amazing human beings that, you know, we don't get, I say this, we don't get paid a lot of money in conservation, but they really want to make a difference in securing for the future that we have black-footed ferrets in the wild, not just in zoos, but in the wild.
I actually worked on the Black-footed Ferret project for U.S. Biological Survey in the early 90s up in Montana, but I couldn't tell you the name of the site. I just remember it was near the Missouri Breaks.
Was it Charles M. Russell?
Yes, that was it.
Yeah, Randy Matchett, did you work for him?
Yes. Well, I didn't work for him. I worked for, I don't remember the gentleman's name with the U.S. Biological Survey, but Randy was up there.
Yeah, he is still around.
Is he really?
He's not looking too good. No, but no, he's still around. And because, you know, yeah, that's true. Yeah, you know, people in this program, you know, I've gone to a lot of other meetings like Grizzly, like Wolf, and you know, people come in and they go, oh, people are happy about black-footed ferret recovery. And I can't tell you how many times I have been out in the public and people have said, like, can I tell you my ferret story? I just love it. I just love it. So thank you. Thank you. You know, I love doing nighttime surveys. I'm a little older. I now snore in the back seat. I can't stay up all night. And sometimes I drool, but you know, I love it. That work, there's just something very rewarding about it. And you know, the shortgrass prairie, people will often say, there's just a whole lot of nothing out there because there's not trees, there's not bushes. But Candace Savage from Canada wrote a great prairie book. She feels there's more biodiversity in the shortgrass prairie than in the Amazon River. It's just most of it's underground. You know, those plants put 2/3 of themselves underground. It's a harsh environment. but it's something, there's only one other place on the planet that comes close to it, and that's in the Russian steppes. So we're very fortunate to have it and very fortunate to have these species. So thank you for your work. Yes.
None of your release sites are in Nebraska. Why is that?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah. No, that's okay. I'll be kind. No. You know, out of the 12 Western states, so if you look at Montana and North Dakota and come down to Texas, 12 Western states that have blacktail, whitetail, and gunnison and healthy populations can support ferrets. 8 of those 12 states have ferrets in the wild, not in North Dakota, Nebraska, Oklahoma, and Texas. And that's really due to politics of the prairie dog, strictly. And I've been told, I don't know if it's true, I love Nebraska. I try to go every year to the sandhill crane migration. I mean, that's the heartbeat of the earth if you want to hear something that moves your soul. But Nebraska's pretty tough on prairie dogs. So that's why. But they have lots of prairie dogs, so we could do it.
How often does a ferret have to kill a prairie dog?
Good question. And you know, I didn't tell you this, but they have the longest canine of any mammal species actually in the world in ratio to their skull. Now, we were told, just say North America, because like our jaguar partners that breed jaguars in Patagonia, they argue with us. Jaguars have the longest canines. And actually the gaboon viper, you know, there are other animals that do, but mammals, black-footed ferrets have those long teeth. So they sneak up on those prairie dogs underground while they're sleeping, because these guys are nocturnal, these guys are diurnal. They grab them by the throat and they crush their throat. And then those ferrets have to hang on while that prairie dog suffocates. We hear it up at the Ferret Center when we're live feeding. It's not for the faint of heart. I love prairie dogs, but I love my black-footed ferrets, and they're learning how to survive in the wild. And so they kill a prairie dog once every 3 days. They cache it. They consume the whole prairie dog, the skin, the eyes, the teeth, the claws, the bones. They clean their plate. They clean their plate. They consume the whole thing.
So do the ferrets share their kill with, besides their young, with other ferrets, or do they?
No. So when those young reach about 90 to 100 days, they split from the mom, the female, and then everybody lives alone. How sad. Kind of like me. They live alone the rest of the year. Until breeding season. And the females defend those territories. The males kind of take, 2 or 3 females. So they really travel larger areas. And they come together for 3 or 4 days in the spring to breed. And then that's it. And the females do all the rearing of the kids. Nothing is badder or meaner than a female ferret that has kids. I mean, they are just, aren't we? I'm a mom, I can say that. I can get pretty, tough. But any other questions? Yes.
You are very good at your job, and thank you for sharing it.
Well, thank you. I really have the best job on the planet. I mean, who gets to travel with black-footed ferrets? I travel all the states. I get to sleep in a hotel room with dude. You haven't lived until, I know he doesn't snore, but he rocks and rolls about 2 a.m. So I put him in the bathroom. Once I was in a hotel and I had firemen come to my door and they knocked and they said, okay, we're down the hall down there, but what is going on in there? And I said, okay, come on. I'm in my PJs and I'm like, come on in. You want to see the most endangered mammal in North America? So who gets to do that and talk ferret? Who gets to do that kind of stuff? So thank you. I love it. I have a passion. Well, anyway, any other questions?
You shared the names of some of the ferrets. How do they get named?
Oh, okay. Well, number one, Dave, probably Sue can tell you, you are not supposed to name animals in captive breed. You're just not. They all have a stud book number. Yeah, they all have a stud book number. So dude is like 9,000. There's been over 10,000, almost 11,000 ferrets born in the captive breeding program since 1987. They all have names. We feel they all have unique names. But the staff, we get to do that. That's a perk. So we have a beer line, you know, when Odell's comes out, we have a blue paddle, you know, we have a, you know, when they come out with a new beer, we have a chocolate line. I tend to name ferrets for political reasons, like Darren Attenberry. You know, he came up to the, because we sit on Meadow Springs Ranch. We sit on city property, utilities. And he came up to see it, and I named a ferret after him, and it hung in his office. I mean, he was so proud of that. And so I love it because people love to have ferret kits named after them. It's like, what do you mean they died? They were 2. Well, yeah, they don't live that long, but you know, so we get to name ferrets all kinds of crazy names.
One more online
Okay.
question. Do ferrets get mange?
You know, good question. We were asking that. We don't think so. Do prairie dogs? Dave? Yeah, Sue, do you know? I don't know that either. Someone asked that. Prairie dogs, they're fighting, you know, they do that. Sue Kenny is the prairie dog expert. You know, she knows so much, but infanticide is happening right now, right? Isn't that? Or maybe birth hasn't happened, but you know, they nurse their young in the coteries, you know, they'll nurse each other and then they'll kill their babies and then they go back to nursing them. And but they're not looking real good right now up at the Ferret Center. They look like they're missing patches, but we're not sure. That's a good question. I tell you, ferrets are highly susceptible to COVID. And when the COVID, well, mustelids are. Look at all those minks that died in Europe. And so when COVID hit, we went on lockdown, and we're on lockdown anyway. We are not open to the public. We could not be in the same room with each other. We had N95s. We couldn't use the same pen or pencil every day. We had to bring a new one from home. We had more vaccines, I think, than anybody. We had a COVID vaccine developed for the black-footed ferret before there was a human vaccine for COVID. And that's because we were scared to death that we were going to be responsible for the extinction of the species due to something that we couldn't control. And it was easy. You know, they all did a plague vaccine developed by Tony Roque in Madison, Wisconsin. And she came to us and she said, easy peasy, I can do this. I can take that plague vaccine. I can pull out the spike for the plague spike protein. I can pop in the COVID. And that's what she did. And so we, out of the whole population, maybe a little over a third we vaccinated because we just weren't sure what was going to happen. And then the story broke and we got FOIA'd, you know, I mean, we're responsible to you, taxpayers. And so I believe in the FOIA, but Freedom of Information Act. And so, and I'm in charge of all those. So it was a pain in the butt, but again, we knew we were doing the right thing, but the guy wanted to know why a vaccine for ferrets when there's not one for humans. It was tough. And now guess what's hitting? Because this is close to your heart, avian flu. So again, we're up there. We're writing protocols to follow if we find any dead birds up there. Today, our leadership from Denver came up to the Ferret Center and he said 5 condors now have been diagnosed with avian flu. And they found it in the whooping crane. So I know, I'm sorry, but you know, knowledge is power. It's power. And we can only do things if we know it. So to help. Yeah.
Maybe one more question?
Yeah.
I'm wondering, is there a way to combat avian flu? When it started, we were at the lake.
Yeah.
And
Dead birds.
and it was dying, and it was heart-rending, and is that gonna eliminate massive numbers of these species, or are there things we can do?
You know, my 4-letter word is hope. And I always think yeah, we can do something. We have to do something. I mean, we just can't sit by. I don't know. Do you two know anything more about I know it's made the jump to mammals. You know, I know they found skunk, puma, black bear, fox. So, yeah. So we have, as humans, we need to be careful, vigilant, follow the CDC guidelines, if you find it, I'm just talking to the choir, bag it up, wear a mask. I don't know, there are probably too many of us on this planet. 8 billion of us on this planet, and disease might be our downfall. But I'm with you, we need to do something. Yeah, what can we do? I don't know. Any suggestions, John?
Well, just, there are tips available to help make sure that you're not a vector for spreading the disease. But as far as its transmission in the wild right now, I haven't heard anybody claiming to have answers. But I've also heard for the species that are most hard hit, that this isn't like a threat to the continued existence of most of the species that are being hit. Now, if you're talking about California condors, that's really, really scary, and whooping cranes as well. But I'm pretty sure the Canada geese are going to outlive all of us. And probably all of our current duck species, and most of the raptors feeding on them. But I don't mean to downplay how serious it is, because it's really serious, and it could be devastating for endangered species, and it could really reduce populations, without leading to an extinction of so many types of wildlife that we all love and enjoy.
I think we just get out every day and enjoy what we have. Dave Leatherman said one of the most profound things to me. He said, people just don't go in their backyards and look up. Just go in your backyard and look up. What birds do you see? What beautiful mammals that, cross your backyard, front yard. I do that every day just because Dave told me so.
So, we're going to end the question and answer, and that'll leave us, 25 minutes.